Howdy! Welcome to the White Guy Show. I be Whitey. I'm the Whitey in question. Okay, so I just got done watching a documentary, which is called. I believe it's from the BBC. I believe the series is called Storyville, and it's Waco-Madman or Messiah Part 1 and 2. And it has to deal with the events of Waco, Texas, involving David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. And oh, you want to get your brains splattered psychologically, go watch this documentary. Go find it somewhere on Netflix or something and watch it. Because, wow. Wow. And when I was, it happened in 93, so I may have been 11? 11? 10 or 11 when this happened. I don't know. I'm so old. But I remember watching the events unfold to extent. I, of course, remember watching the building be on fire. I don't know if I watched it in real time, but I remember when that was happening. I remember watching the events of Waco, Texas on TV. If you're not familiar, and the documentary, of course, gets into this, so let me just explain. The document gets into some of the history. So back in the 30s, I'm not going to remember what his name's, but there was a group that got started called uh, Jeepers. I think it's just the Davidians, and they are a group of people that believe that the Messiah will return, the apocalypse, all that kinds of stuff. They're Christians, and they believe, but they're a specific group of Christians who believe in something called the seven seals, which is in the Bible, and basically the end is nigh. The end times is coming, and we will see it in our lifetime. And they made a prediction in the 30s or 40s that in 1959 the end times would come, and then oopsies, they made an oopsie. The end times, and then the 1960 happened. And so when you do that, it's kind of hard to keep your followers going. So the group fractured. The guy who started the whole thing passed away. His wife took over. I'm going to forget all the details. But then a guy named Vernon Howell joined the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, and got in with the one of the dude's now elderly wife who was 60, got her prego. The baby miscarried because it's a 60-year-old lady. And then they basically, he kicked her out of the church, took over the church. The son of the old lady was like, F you, this is my church. There was a shootout. Vernon Howell and his guys got exonerated for whatever reason. I think there was like a legal technicality. And then the guy who, the son, killed somebody else in a separate incident and was charged for murder, ended up in the insane asylum. He was charged with insanity. Thankfully for him, he's probably is cray cray with all the church stuff. So, the Vernon Howell character went to Israel, learned up more about Jebus, and then came back and changed his name to David Koresh, which anybody who's familiar with the Waco, Texas thing would recognize that name. David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. And so they had a compound in Waco, and then so you get some of that story, and then you learn about David Koresh. Oh. And part of you kind of feels for the guy because he his father got his mother prego when she was 12 or 13. She had to be 13. She had him when she was 14 or 13. And what they're doing is in the documentary, they're doing all these interviews with family members, Branch Davidians, historians, journalists at the time, and they do a really good job of giving kind of a full spectrum. It's not just one side. It's not these guys were just jerks or anything. They talk to survivors, all this stuff. But part of that is somebody. This is you're going way back. And just like I can't remember the age I was when this happened exactly. I was 11 or 12, maybe 10. Same thing. It's like she got knocked up at 13 or 14, and one guy says 13, the other one says 14. So in any event, Vernon Howell, his father, by some accounts, split. In other accounts, was pretty abusive to his son. Vernon had a stutter and was dyslexic at a time where I'm sure dyslexia, not a lot of people really knew what that was. And so he had a rough upbringing, for sure. I believe he got adopted by his grandparents or something. And he had a rough life. And so he ends up, he was a Jesus goer, he was a church goer, but always had friction with the churches he was in. Didn't really buy what they were selling, their version of things. And so he ends up with the Branch Davidians as kind of just a lost soul looking for somewhere to be, really. So coming through all that, you kind of feel some sympathy for the guy. But then when you knock up a 60-year-old lady, and then there was one version the guy was saying that they basically were driving down the road in the van, opened the door, and pushed her out of the van. They basically forced her out of her own thing that her husband had created and that they had run for decades. And so it's like I'd like to, and you get used if you go watch the documentary, you know anything about David Koresh. You can't. You're always coming back to. I want to feel sorry for you. I want to see your side of things. I want to hear what you had to say, but you're making it impossible with the things you do to feel at least empathy for your situation. You were making this happen through selfishness and greed. And if you're not familiar, so the former Vernon Howell, now David Koresh, takes over the Branch Davidians, becomes their leader. And what then happens as you're watching the documentary, it's not all chronological. They're going back and forth and helping tie in how things are connected. But everybody said the same thing. All the survivors said the same thing. It started off in a way innocently enough, but David Koresh got deeper and deeper into his own BS. And so he was a guy who had the Bible memorized, would sit there and teach sermons for hours, and people came from all over the world. Not a tremendous amount of people, 300-400 over so many years or whatever it was. There were 200 and some odd people in the events that are coming up took place, but and he had them convinced that he was a different phases. He was a messenger of God, or he was an enlightened guy, and they said that you would learn more from David Koresh in 2 hours than you would learn in 2 years or 20 years. And he had when you watch these all these home videos with him and stuff, he had a level of charisma. Make no mistake. And so he could convince people into what he was saying, even as what happened was, and I've been here before. It starts off innocently enough. You're just learning about Jesus. You're just reading the Bible. What could go wrong? Until they start buying guns and converting semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons, buying hand grenades, training people with rifles, training their kids with rifles. He got deeper and deeper into his own psychosis and began believing his own nonsense, basically. And so here's a guy who came from a hard upbringing. You feel bad for him, and this was his way of compensating for his insecurities and his lack of self-worth. His life's not going anywhere. He was a musician they had a band through all this. So all the stuff at Waco and all the death and tragedy, the whole time they were trying to get the band back together, which is crazy. One of the dudes who survived, was brought in to be a drummer. Yeah, dude, got a call the other day from my buddy Dave, and he's like, bro, I want you to come out here and be our drummer for us, bro. We're putting the band back together. Next thing I know, the whole fucking building's on fire. ATF is outside, and the FBI is shooting at us. I'm like, well, this is one hell of a gig. That's that's one way to. Wow, that's I was a drummer. I didn't have that experience. I guess I got out in time. So But the whole thing, it started out innocuously enough. They would grow gardens and they would make their own clothes and live off the grid. And they had this compound outside of Waco that they built with their own two hands and all this kind of stuff. And everybody, and then David Koresh started something called the New Light and basically said all the dudes have to be celibate from now on. Your marriages are annulled, and I'm gonna sleep with your daughters, and only I can have sex with all the women here independent of age, because I need, according to the Seven Seals, there needs to be 24 children born of his seed because he's now the Messiah or a Messiah, depending on which interview, and it depending on what interview you're looking at one point in time and who you're asking, he was either God or Jesus or just a messenger or a prophet, and then he's maybe I am Jesus. But you would hear it in recorded phone conversations. Where he'd say, "What if I am the Messiah? What if I am God?" You can just watch this guy slipping deeper and deeper into his own psychosis, and the cult thing gets crazier and crazier. So nobody walked in the door going, "Oh, and by the by, we're going to have a shootout with the ATF and the FBI, and most of you are going to be dead, and a bunch of you are going to burn to death," which is what happened. Okay? Instead, it was like, "Let me tell you about Jesus." That's how they get you. That's how they get you. So, but it is fascinating to watch. It is heartbreaking because there's hundreds of home videos that they're showing you clips of, and all those little kids bounce around in those home videos died in a fire. Whether from smoke inhalation or from flame itself, and a lot of people were shot by the other Davidians to avoid burning to death. And you can't help but think, God, what was it like? What was it like as the whole building is on fire and the end is nigh? Do they snap out of the psycho? And so that's the interesting question. Did they snap out of psychosis at the last second and go, "Holy shit, we're full of shit the whole time, and I'm gonna die for nothing"? Or did they go to their graves still believing that this was the thing to do? And a lot of the survivors, after you go through this whole adventure yourself watching this documentary, I recommend it to anybody. They're all still saying the same thing. Like watching those people either die from smoke inhalation or burn to death, but they all became crispy critters, and they're still like a bunch of the survivors are like, "I'm sorry, I didn't die with him. I should have died with him." It wasn't, "Wow, did that guy con us good and screw us over?" It was, "I'm sorry, I lament that I survived. I wish I'd been in there with him." Oh, God, damn. So even when I think it was 82 people died, 23 were children. Um, they're still believing in the guy who put the whole thing together. So what happened is they were selling they were buying guns that were semi-automatic and converting them to automatic. That falls into the jurisdiction of the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency. ATF went to do a raid, and what happened was the raid was heavily predicated on surprise because these dudes are armed. It's a compound. It's a very good defensive position. It's going to be a bitch to take them down. And a reporter who got tipped off that this was happening and was trying to get to where it is called Mount Carmel, outside of Waco. And a reporter asked the guy at an intersection, as their vehicles are passing, he says, "Hey, I'm looking for Mount Carmel." And I don't know if he said there's a raid and I'm with the press and I'm trying to get there. But the guy he asked was a Branch Davidian. And the Branch Davidian got on the phone with David Koresh and said the ATF is coming. An inside undercover agent type of guy who was there that day, went in to go check on him, and they're sitting there reading Bible. It's a normal day, and then David Koresh gets a phone call. He comes back. The whole tone changes, And the guy's name is Robert, and he goes, "They're coming for us, Robert. They're coming. Hey, go ahead and get out of here." And then that guy, Robert Rodriguez, went to the ATF and said, "Guys, they know you're coming. They know. You can't do this raid. You're going to get chopped up." And so, as one ATF agent put it, it went from a raid of surprise to an ambush. And four ATF agents got shot and killed, and I think just something like 15 wounded. And then six Branch Davidians got killed. And I've watched. There's a Netflix series on this. I watched part of it. I'm gonna need to watch the whole thing. And there's another documentary I've watched part of. But again, accounts vary all over the place. But ATF walked in. They got their butts kicked, basically, not understanding. And again, accounts vary. So they had the grunts understood they were walking into a hard job. Brass didn't know. Somebody made, whoever made the call, once they knew that the Davidians had been tipped that they were coming, somebody said, hurry up, we're going anyway. Whoever made that call fucked up. And the documentary doesn't name a name. Whoever's decision that was, that's who fucked up. That's who fucked this whole thing up. Because, yeah, the dude's being David Koresh, he's sleeping with underage girls, or as young as 12. There's a level of abuse going on. It became very authoritarian, dictatorial. One guy said that there'd be an armed guard in the front and an armed guard in the back, and you couldn't leave without permission. The formerly married men who now had their marriages and old would live in one quarters, the women would live in another one. And it was very much walking around on eggshells. But they could have waited 2 days, got reinforcements, and gone about it a different way. And whoever made that call fucked the whole thing up. So ATF gets the shit shot out of them. No dishonor to the grunts, but again, whoever made that call. FBI comes in, takes over the situation, and there was a lot of, between ATF, FBI, negotiators, a lot of butting heads about how to proceed forward. David Koresh did release about 2 women and a dozen children or something like that. But there was a 51-day standoff, and then ATF, FBI, mostly FBI with some military support, they go and they start pouring in tear gas and start knocking down walls with tanks to pump in tear gas. And they're firing in tear gas canisters, trying to draw everybody out. Their patience had run out. David was stalling with, I just need to speak to the radio. I need to give a message out there. I need to write this manuscript about the seven seals. I need to get that done. And the FBI got frustrated with that, so they went in, knocked down some walls, pumped in tear gas, and depending on who you ask, David Koresh and the Branch Davidians lit the building on fire. And 9 people got out, 84 people did not, 23 of them were kids, and they all died in the fire, consequences of the fire. And it's heartbreaking. But when you watch it on TV, it seems like, oh, it happened in 30 seconds and there's no way to get out. It didn't. I don't know exactly how long it took for the whole building to burn down, but there was time. It was kind of like a fire started in 3 spots near simultaneously. Would suggest that the Davidians did light it, but when you're watching it happen, it's like, God, get out. There was time for literally all of them to get out, but the dudes who just participated in shooting 4 ATF agents and killing them are looking at manslaughter, murder 1, murder 2, depending on your role. From their vantage point, at least, that's the way they're seeing it. And then, the women and the older adult women are convinced this guy's God, this guy's the Messiah. It's my job to die with my God. And then the kids have no clue what's going on. And so the FBI and the ATF are like, where are the kids? Where are the kids? Get the kids out at least. But they were all David Koresh's kids. biological children. He had already let the other children go. And so they were his special God seed kids. You know, no one was going to let them out because they need to die in the fire with God or some shit. But it's crazy studying the mindset of it. And it started out with just a rock band and the love of Jesus, and then ended up with 82 people dead, 84 people dead, whichever it was. So, again, go check out this documentary and get your mind blown, man. Waco, Madman or Messiah. Some crazy, crazy stuff. So that's it for me, kids. Go check it out. Comment in comment section what do you think about David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.